Welcome to Debt Matters.
It's good to be here.
Today, we're looking at a very specific piece of news that's come out of the UK Treasury. But, as always, we're not just going to redo the headlines.
Bro.
We're going to use this news to really get into the mechanics of cash flow, the psychology of payment, and, well, how businesses decide who gets paid and when.
Precisely. It's a story that, it starts with a government announcement, a press release, but it ends in the accounts receivable department of every single supplier who's selling into the hospitality industry.
So let's lay out the facts first. What is the actual announcement?
The UK Treasury has released details on a business rates support package. And it's very targeted.
Right.
It's aimed specifically at pubs and live music venues in England and Wales.
Okay. And the headline number?
It's an annual package.
Yeah.
And they're quoting a figure of £80 million.
80 million. And whenever we hear a number like that, it sounds massive.
It does.
It sounds like a flood of cash is about to hit the market. But our job is to, break that down to the unit level. What does this actually mean for the individual pub owner on the ground?
And that's the crucial question. When you drill down into the details, the package offers a 15% reduction in business rates.
15%.
15%. And this is set to kick in from April 1st.
Okay.
Now, there is a cap involved, but if we just look at the average saving, the number that's being talked about, we're looking at roughly £1,650.
For the whole year?
For the whole year, for the average pub.
Right. Let's just stop there for a second. 1,650 pounds. That is the reality of that huge 80 million pound figure when it's spread across the entire sector.
That's the per business reality, yes.
Yeah.
And to add to that, bills are also expected to be frozen in real terms for another 2 years.
So the government's claim is what?
They're claiming that around 3/4 of pubs will see their bills either fall or stay flat next year.
Now, context is everything here. This didn't just appear out of thin air. It wasn't some, spontaneous gift from the Treasury.
No, not at all. This has come after quite a bit of industry backlash. There were planned reforms on the table that had people very, very worried.
So real fear in the sector.
Oh, absolutely. A genuine fear about closures, about job losses. So we really have to frame this as a reaction to that pressure. It's a modification of a policy, really, designed to soften a blow that the industry thought was coming.
Okay, so we have the numbers, we have the context. But here is the critical question for everyone listening. Why are we talking about a small business rates cut on a show about debt?
Because every single time a debtor's financial landscape changes, even slightly, their payment behavior changes with it. And we need to analyze whether this policy change is actually a solution to the solvency issues in hospitality, or if it's just, a temporary patch, a sticking plaster.
And if you're a creditor?
If you're a creditor, if you're the one supplying these pubs, you absolutely have to understand how this news affects your likelihood of getting paid. It changes the conversation.
Right. Let's get into the reality of this relief then. We've got this figure, 1,650 pounds. Is that a game changer?
I think the best way to describe it is as a release valve. It's a short-term cash flow release valve. It is not a structural fix.
A release valve.
Right.
So it lets off a little bit of steam.
A little bit.
But it doesn't turn down the heat that's boiling the water in the first place.
That's a perfect analogy. Exactly. Think about the operating model of a pub or a music venue right now. I mean, the margins are they're incredibly tight.
What are the biggest pressures?
Well, you've got rent, which is often high and, completely unyielding. You have utilities. Energy costs have been a massive, massive story.
Of course.
Then you've got wages, VAT, supplier terms, and on top of all that, the sheer volatility of the seasons. A bad summer can be devastating.
So if you're saving 1,600 quid a year, that breaks down to, what, about 130 pounds a month?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah.
Just over that. And look, any saving is welcome. Of course it is. But does 130 quid a month solve the problem of your energy bill doubling?
No.
Does it solve the problem of wage inflation? Of course not. It might help you avoid some immediate pressure, perhaps, but it doesn't resolve that wider financial reality. The structural issues in hospitality are still there.
So for a supplier out there listening to this, there's a real danger in hearing this news and assuming their customers are suddenly flush with cash.
That is the trap. That is the #1 mistake to make. The margin problem hasn't gone away. Expenses are down a tiny bit, but the squeeze is still on.
And this leads us directly to the debtors narrative. This is something we see time and time again, isn't it? A piece of news like this comes out, and it immediately becomes a script for the accounts payable department.
It creates what we call a delay line.
Yeah.
As a creditor, you ring up to chase an overdue invoice, and the debtor said,
Oh, haven't you heard?
exactly. Haven't you heard the good news? We've got rates relief coming. The government's stepping in. We'll pay you next month.
And on the surface, it sounds plausible. It sounds like a valid reason.
It sounds logical, but it is a massive red flag. Because, as we just established, the relief doesn't even start until April 1st.
Right. It's not in their bank now.
And the amount is relatively small on a monthly basis. So if a debtor is using a future, very modest saving as an excuse not to pay a past due invoice today,
Yeah.
that is a stalling tactic, plain and simple.
It's just kicking the can down the road.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And unless that statement, "will pay you next month,"
Oh.
is followed up immediately with a specific, concrete payment plan, you have to treat it with a huge amount of skepticism. Relief in April does not create liquidity in the bank account today.
It's a psychological game as much as it is a financial one.
Yeah.
And that takes us to the psychology of payment. We often talk about the pay order. When a business has a limited pot of cash, there's a hierarchy of who gets paid.
Every single business has a pay order, whether they write it down on a whiteboard or not. It's the unspoken, sometimes unconscious, prioritization of creditors.
So if a fixed cost, like business rates, goes down, even by a little bit, what actually happens to that freed up cash?
Well, the optimistic supplier, the naive one, thinks, great, they have more money, so now they'll pay my overdue invoice.
But that's not how it works.
That's not how it works. The reality of what we call the loudest voice theory suggests something very different.
The loudest voice theory.
Yes. When a bit of extra cash becomes available in a stressed business, it doesn't just spread out evenly like water. It flows to the most urgent pressure points. It flows to the loudest problems demanding to be solved.
Okay, so let's break that down. Who are the loud voices in a typical pub?
Payroll. That's always number one.
Yeah.
It's the loudest voice. You have to pay your staff or they don't show up and you can't open the doors. It's existential.
Can't argue with that. What's next?
Rent. Landlords can be very loud. If you don't pay the landlord, you get eviction notices, you lose the premises. Again, existential.
Okay, so staff and roof over your head?
Then you've got HMRC. The tax man has very strong powers of recovery, and they are not afraid to use them.
They're a very loud voice.
A very loud voice. And then you have your emergency repairs. You know, if the beer cooler breaks, you have to fix it. You can't sell warm beer. It's an immediate operational crisis.
So in that list, payroll, rent, HMRC, broken fridges. Where does the supplier of, say, crisps or glassware or beer mats, where do they sit?
Usually, much, much further down the list, and that is the risk. The supplier assumes this little bit of relief will eventually trickle down to them automatically. But if you're quiet, if you're passive, that extra 130 quid will be completely absorbed by the urgent demands of payroll or rent long before it ever reaches you.
So your core message is that passivity leads to non-payment.
Always is the golden rule. You must actively control your place in that queue. You cannot just sit back and rely on the trickle-down effect of a government policy. It will never reach you.
It's also worth touching on the connection between these policy shocks and, well, payment shocks. You mentioned the backlash earlier, the fear businesses had before this relief was announced.
Yes, and this is a really key point. Uncertainty is the absolute enemy of consistent payment. When businesses fear reforms or when they're just uncertain about their future costs, what do? They hold on to their cash. They hoard it.
So even before the relief arrives, the mere discussion, the news cycle around the policy can freeze payments.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
We see disputes rise. We see credit terms get stretched to their limit.
Yeah.
You hear far more vague promises. You know, an excuse like, let's just see what the chancellor says in the budget, becomes the new way to delay payment.
Policy shocks almost always translate into payment shocks.
It's a direct link. The news cycle is actually driving the payment cycle.
That's a crucial insight.
And if you're a supplier and you're not watching the news that your debtors are watching, you are flying completely blind. You won't understand the excuses they're about to give you.
So let's pivot. We have analyzed the problem. We understand the context and the psychology. Now we need to give our listeners a toolkit. If you are selling to pubs, to venues, to anyone in that hospitality supply chain, what do you do differently this week after hearing this news?
Okay, the first step, the absolute first thing you do is a risk assessment refresh.
Why do we need to refresh it now? If we checked our customers' credits 6 months ago, isn't that enough?
In this kind of climate, 6 months is a lifetime. A business's health can change dramatically in that time. You need to look at your top 20 accounts by value.
Okay.
And specifically, you need to zoom in on the ones that are already marked as slow pay.
The amber lights on the dashboard?
Exactly, your regular late payers. You need to reevaluate their creditworthiness in light of the current trading environment. Do not just rely on historical data. Look at their payment patterns over the last 3, maybe 4 months. Are they getting slower? Is the debt aging even more?
And once we've identified those risks, how do we change how we chase them? You talk about a pivot from the statement to the invoice.
This is a really fundamental tactical shift. So many businesses, by default, just send out a statement of account at the end of the month.
Yeah, it's standard practice.
It's standard. It's a list of everything outstanding. It's very polite. It's very British.
And very, very easily ignored.
It is entirely passive. A statement just says, here is the overall situation. It doesn't inherently demand action on any one specific item. We need to move to chasing specific invoices.
So instead of an email that says, your account balance is £5,000, what are we saying instead?
We are being surgical. We are saying, I'm calling about invoice number 1245 from January 12th for the delivery of 3 kegs of lager. It was due last week. You mentioned dates. You mentioned purchase order references. You mentioned the delivery confirmation.
You're removing all the ambiguity. You're giving them nowhere to hide.
Exactly. When you send a vague statement, the debtor can easily say, oh, I haven't reconciled that yet, or I need to check that with accounts. When you chase a specific invoice with proof of delivery, you remove their ability to stall. You force them to address that one specific debt right here, right now.
And when you get them on the phone, what's the killer question?
There's a very specific phrasing we recommend. We call it the clean question.
Go on.
You don't ask, when can you pay? You ask, what date will the bank transfer land in our account, and for which specific invoice numbers?
That is very precise. What date will the transfer land, not when will you send it?
Correct. When will you send it? Invites all sorts of vague answers like end of the week or soon or I'll do it this afternoon. Asking when will it land forces them to think about the 3-day banking cycle. It's a concrete outcome.
And asking for which invoice numbers.
That forces them to commit to allocating the cash. It stops them from just sending you a random round sum payment that doesn't actually clear any of the old invoices off the books.
It creates a clear, specific promise.
It forces a commitment. And if they say it will land on Friday, and it's for invoices 1, 2, and 3, and then Friday comes and the money doesn't arrive, you now have a broken promise. And a broken promise is a much, much stronger lever for escalation than just a vague failure to pay soon.
Okay, let's talk more about that negotiation, because often the debtor is going to say, look, I hear you, but I can't pay it all right now.
And that happens all the time. This is where you deploy the 2-option close. It's a classic sales technique, but it works brilliantly in debt collection.
So how does it work?
The key is you never ask a yes-no question, like, can you pay?
Yeah.
Because the answer might just be no, and then the conversation is over.
Right.
Instead, you give them 2 choices, both of which are acceptable to you. You control the framework.
So give us the options.
Option 1, okay, I understand. How about you pay the oldest single invoice on the account in full right now while we are on the phone?
And option 2.
Option 2. Or you can pay 50% of the total balance now, and we'll agree a fixed date for the remaining 50%, say, in 7 or 14 days.
And why does this work so well psychologically?
It gives the debtor a sense of control. They feel like they are choosing the solution, which makes them more likely to follow through. But if you notice, both options involve you getting paid some money immediately.
You framed the whole negotiation so that you win either way. You're not leaving empty-handed.
Exactly. You're not asking if they will pay. You are negotiating how they will pay. It completely shifts the dynamic of the call.
And once they've picked an option, what's the final crucial step?
You must apply the written rule.
Which is?
Get it in an email immediately while you are still on the phone if possible.
Vague verbal promises are where aged debt goes to die. That's the quote, isn't it?
That is the mantra you should have stuck on your monitor. You can have a great phone call. They could be full of the best intentions, but if it is not written down, it effectively didn't happen. You need that paper trail to enforce accountability.
So you send an email saying what?
Just confirming the conversation. Hi, John. As just discussed, you've agreed to pay X amount by Y date to clear invoice Z. Thanks for sorting. It makes it real.
It makes it much harder for them to back out of it without losing face.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to zoom out a bit now from the individual call to the broader strategy of managing the whole ledger. You can't make these calls to hundreds of accounts every day.
No, you need a system to prioritize your effort. And we always recommend the traffic light system. It's simple, it's visual, and it's incredibly effective.
Green, amber, red, I think we can guess.
Green accounts are the dream. They pay on time every time. They're low maintenance. You love them. Just keep doing what you're doing.
The amber.
Amber accounts are your slow payers. They're maybe 7 to 30 days late consistently. These are your official watch list. They aren't a 5-alarm fire yet, but they are sliding. They need regular, gentle contact.
And the red accounts.
These are the problem children. 30-plus days late. Or they're the accounts that give you repeat broken promises and the same old excuses. These require immediate, decisive action.
And what does that action look like?
It's escalation. You cannot treat a red account the same way you treat a green account. You need to impose tighter terms. Maybe you switch them to pro forma invoices.
So they have to pay before you even deliver the goods.
Exactly. Pay up front. Or maybe you reduce their credit limit. Or you can use staged deliveries. You only deliver half the order now, and they get the other half when the overdue debt is cleared.
That sounds tough. You risk upsetting the customer.
It is tough.
Yeah.
But you were running a business, not a bank. If an account is consistently in the red zone, they're using your cash to fund their business. You have to stop the bleeding before it affects your own cash flow.
Now, let's just flip the perspective for a moment. We've been talking to the creditors, the suppliers, but what if you're listening to this and you are that pub owner? You're the one who owes the money.
That's a very fair question. And if you are the debtor, you can use this small bit of relief very smartly.
The advice here is all about ring fencing, isn't it?
Yes. If you are getting this rate relief, the worst thing you can do is just let it vanish into your general operating expenses. Don't just let it get swallowed up by the day-to-day. You have to ring fence that cash.
So you actively set it aside for debt reduction.
Yes. Treat it like a special projects fund. Use it for a structured catch-up plan. Look at your aged creditors. Pick the oldest one and apply that specific saving to that specific debt. It shows good faith.
And communication is key from that side, too.
Oh, it's the superpower of the debtor. Creditors are just people. They're often surprisingly flexible, but only if you are proactive.
So the golden rule is call them before they have to call you.
Absolutely, 100%. If you call a supplier and say, look, I know I owe you 500 pounds. Here's my plan. I had this rate relief coming in April, and I am formally allocating that month's saving to your account on this specific date, well, they're going to be much more willing to work with you.
It builds trust. It shows you're taking it seriously.
It completely separates you from all the other debtors who are just dodging their calls and hoping the problem goes away.
So looking ahead, we've got April 1st on the calendar as the date this all kicks in. What should we be watching for?
We need to see how the final details land. Government announcements often have a lot of fine print that emerges later. And we also need to see how quickly that benefit is actually felt by businesses. Does it hit their cash flow immediately, or is there some kind of administrative lag?
And you mentioned a warning here about something called sticky arrears.
Yes, this is the real danger zone for the sector over the next year. If the sector faces rising costs elsewhere, if the price of beer from the breweries goes up, if the minimum wage goes up again, then this small rates relief might just act as a buffer against new inflation rather than a tool to pay down old debt.
So the immediate distress might reduce a little, but the arrears, the old historic debt on the books, that might just stay there. It gets stuck.
It gets stuck.
Yeah.
Exactly. Late payments will persist unless the fundamental trading conditions of the business actually improve. A rate cut helps, but it doesn't fix a business model that's fundamentally broken by high costs and low margins.
It really brings us right back to that core question of viability, doesn't it?
It raises a really provocative thought to leave people with. Is government support like this actually designed to change the long-term survival rate of a business? Or does it perhaps simply delay the inevitable for those businesses that don't manage their debt strategically?
That is the heavy question to end on. If you don't fix the underlying plumbing of the cash flow, then just pouring a little more water in at the top won't ever stop the leaks at the bottom.
Precisely. The money always matters, but the management of that money matters so much more.
We have covered a lot of ground today, from a Treasury press release right down to the trenches of the accounts department.
It's all connected, the macro and the micro.
Thank you for listening to Debt Matters.
Goodbye.
And we will catch you on the next one.